as well as reminding you about growing degree days. Growing degree days are what we use to predict insects and some diseases. And we've given you, oh dear, I did leave those in there. Sorry for the big orange letters. We did give you some references, books, as well as websites. There's still no better book than Coincide, done by 20 years of work by Don Orton at the Morton Arboretum. Spent 20 years carefully recording what insects appeared when, and how many growing degree days, how much heat had accumulated since the beginning of the growing season. And in the book, I can look up euonymus. If I look up euonymus, it says that these are the 4 things that are quite common on euonymus: scale, maple scale, weevil, and San Jose scale. These are the insects, because that's what he was looking at, the insects. So I can look up the plant and say, here's what it's likely to get. Then I can look up that pest and hear about its life cycle, what time of year it occurs, and what it does on the plant.
The damage, when it's vulnerable.
When it's best to control it is its vulnerable stage. Aim at it then. And then what this book is about, what Coincide is about, is phenology, or the coincidence of a plant blooms on accumulated heat, an insect develops on accumulated heat. So if you can look at what plants are doing a certain thing at a certain time, you can predict when your insects are going to appear. So his indicator plants is when the tree lilac, Syringa reticulata, is beginning to bloom, and catalpa is in the early bloom. He says, look for that, and then you can predict when the euonymus scale is going to be at a point where you could maybe knock it off with water, or use an insecticide on it, or check to see if it's going to be bad this year.
And he gave you alternative plants also.
Right, and what state they would be in. I can also say, well, I've got a tree lilac. What does it tell me? I can look up in that book, tree lilac, and say that these are the insects that you can use the tree lilac as a timer for. Now, Coincide was written quite a long time ago. It was revised once in 2007. They're both out of print. They're both obviously very well appreciated because it's hard to find them even in used bookstores. But if you find one, grab it. But the system, the phenology system,
great book.
Because of Don Orton more than anything else, phenology has been around for thousands of years probably, where farmers tell each other, plant your corn when the oak leaves are big as a mouse's ear. But it was his book that convinced the other extension educators that this was a good way to deal with things. So there are a lot of trackers out there. We gave you website links for trackers for looking at how many growing degree days do I have. So I can look at a chart like we gave you that says, here's when those insects occur. Michigan has a map that I can open up. The link will take you to a map where I can say, I'm going to pick Commerce Township, which is close to me there. And I'll get the information in Commerce Township. The total degree days on July 9th was 1,068. I can now look at my chart, see which insects are doing what at 1,068 degree days. There is the tracker that we gave you as their #1 tracker, though, covers Michigan and much of the Great Lakes area. It's got Illinois in it, over to Minnesota. And I can click my area and say I'm in Minneapolis and give it my zip code. Or I can say I'm in White Lake and then dial the chart down to say, where am I right now in 2023 on July 21st? My growing degree days that I look at are 1,200 some. You need to stop moving for a minute. There you go. My growing degree days.
You're pointing at the screen.
Are 1,290. Well, I'm trying to tell you where to point and not move. There you go.
But
okay. Anyway, I can dial down and see where are my growing degree days right now. And I can find that for Chicago, where in Chicago on the 21st, their growing degree days, they've got 200 more growing degree days. I'm at 1,229 in White Lake. They're at 1,457. Their Japanese beetles emerge earlier than my Japanese beetles do, for instance. And that's an important stuff to know. And there's lots of it out there. Canada has a growing degree days. You go to the link will take you to this page and you click on view on map. And you get a map of Canada showing you by color code what growing degree days are in there, and you can then put in Guelph or your postal code.
Mhm.
And you can look and say, there's my Guelph map. Or there's the map of the area that this rectangle is. I can say Guelph is right there. I'm in the dark yellow. And the dark yellow equates to, and I have to open up the legend, 800 to 1,000 growing degree days. And that's 800 to 1,000
Centigrade.
Celsius, right?
Celsius.
And that has to be translated for a lot. If you're using a chart that's a US chart, the growing degree days for the insects are going to be in Fahrenheit, and you'll have to translate. If you're over in New York or Massachusetts or Vermont, some of you that listen in to us, then you can go to the link that we gave you there, and you will notice that a bunch of these links have to do with turf and golf courses.
Yes.
Forecast, for instance, because it is vital
But
for people taking care of sod that they know which diseases are going to be coming up this week, which insects are going to be hatching out to keep that sod clean. So the Michigan Turfgrass Foundation has one too, where I can pick my place. It'll tell me my growing degree days. Will this tell me the weather? It'll tell me that the crabgrass germination is right now late. You're late on crabgrass germination control. Or that the Japanese beetles are emerging now in your area, haven't emerged in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or the north part of Wisconsin, for instance. The turf people really need to know when the bluegrass billbug is active.
oh yeah,
I'm glad that I don't care that much about
Yes.
grass.
me too.
But you look, you'll find, if you put in growing degree days in your state, you'll find things like Illinois Water Survey has a place where I can click on what area I'm in. Even better, in Illinois, Morton Arboretum puts out a plant healthcare report, a newsletter that you can just click on the issue, and it tells you for various cities in northern Illinois where they are, what growing degree days they're at.
What I notice is that there's Waukegan, Illinois, 2 different zip codes, and look at the difference in the degree days.
Almost 100.
Almost 100,
Yeah.
and that could be quite significant.
Yeah.
In a neighborhood.
And also underneath there, you're seeing the beginning of the next page in the report is which insects might be emerging right now. So it combines both things for you, which is really a very nifty thing to have. So if you look, you'll find lots of information, scouting information for Massachusetts out of the Amherst, and it tells you which indicator plants are, for instance, beginning to bloom, so that you know what phenology you're using.
It's pretty cool to have those indicator plants once you learn them in your mind.
That's right.
And you're traveling around and you go, oh, that's in bloom. That means I could start looking for so-and-so or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Your mind holds some of this stuff, believe it or not.
Yeah, it does. And so the reports there out of Amherst are telling us what the total degree days are and what indicator plants are there, so you can start learning those things and you don't have to look up growing degree days. I haven't figured out how to use southern Minnesota, so it's a lot of information, but they're out there. Minnesota does, however, have a list like we gave you, and so we stole the format. It has which insects are coming out. So if you look down a little bit there, Steve, to
Adult emergence, white pine
weevil. So your insect emergence is in there, but your indicator plants are all listed there, and what degree days they're going to show up, and about what date that is. But what's important with degree days is that you're learning that date doesn't matter. Last year, some insects were a month behind where they are this year. It's growing degree days, how much heat accumulated, that makes a difference, and plants are the reliable indicators of that.
Yeah, that's why you can't have a program for certain applications based yearly at this time all the time, because that's when it never works.
And that's why the tree companies are not able to do stuff. If it's a really good tree care company, then they are looking at degree days, and they've read the how to do it, like in Wisconsin gives you. Wisconsin gives you the whole region and how many degree days have accumulated. I can dial it down to put my own space in there, my own location in there, and I can see turf diseases mapped out, or I can dial this little area over here. I can select a disease. Like I did this one for late blight for potatoes and tomatoes to say, how likely is it that late blight is going to be starting now? I think these are pretty cool things to do.
Yeah.
It's not done on a regular basis. So recognize those growing degree days and understand that they're going to happen based on plant development and growing degree days, not calendar. Ohio State even gives us a workbook, really cool little workbook if you want to figure
Really
your own, what's in
figure it
your
out.
own yard,
Yeah.
and figure that out. We gave you a chart of it's mostly woody pests because that's where most of the research has been done.
Yeah.
But we gardeners watching in our own yards, we're developing the other part of it. So University of Connecticut has a great chart, and we gave you that link. Rutgers has a great chart. Now, there are different parts of the country. Some of their pests are different. However, the growing degree days are the same everywhere. The pest follows the same degree days.
Yep.
Great information there and great links in Rutgers report. Okay. So ours, we gave you, and this was, we started this 25 years ago, keeping track of ours, and we've only just redone it to include the trees and shrubs and check on some things. So I can look and say, I've got a star magnolia. I can notice that when it's in full bloom, that's a time when black vine weevil is likely to be coming out. And you'll notice that we're in this part of the, we're past the part of the calendar where the growing degree days are stretched out. There's a lot of things that come out in June. In July, not so many things are controllable. That's why we tell you that when you see a problem in this time of year, once you're into the growing season, generally you're learning you're going to have to control it next year because it's that they were emerging and in vulnerable stages earlier on.